Wants to answer. So my name is Mikael Nyström, and I'm not here to speak anything else than Swedish, and we're going to talk about what's called Microsoft Sovereign Private Cloud. If you want to reach me after this session, you can always send me an email. People go like, oh, do you really reply on emails? Yes, I do. I actually do. It's nice to do that. So a little bit about myself. I've been an MVP for 22 years. I have no reason to understand why, but apparently somebody's thinking I'm doing a good job. For the last 8-9 years, I've been working as an incident responder. Incident responder means that I work with security incidents, but also technical incidents. I've seen fans blowing into pieces. I've seen data centers detonating. I have seen a lot of things that nobody wants to see. That's what I do every day. Walk around in things that are completely busted and broken. My job is to recover, salvage, and rebuild. I'm also very old, and therefore I'm defined as an IT dinosaur. The reason for that is, of course, that I have been working actively with 8-inch floppy drives. That's the size of them. You can have them too, when it's too warm and too hot. So we're going to talk about the idea of the sovereign private cloud. We're also going to look into what we can do for technical stuff, see how it's built, how it's deployed, but as much as we can. Now, this is something that we expected Microsoft to do approximately 2 years ago. But they didn't. They did that this summer. So this was announced in June 2025, but we thought it was something that they would do a long time before that. It's only available in Europe. This doesn't exist anywhere else. You can't buy this or work with this outside of the European Union. It's only inside the European Union, period. It will most likely surface in Asia as well. The reason for this going on is politics changing, the winds are changing, states are different, governments are different, and companies and organizations need to protect the data because we are afraid of data leakage. And we all I had a customer just recently said, I'm not going to use any kind of software from the United States. Okay, that's great. So you're going to use what? A pen? Yes. No, we're going to use Linux. Well, that's also developed in the US. Oh, we're going to flip to Lotus 123. Lotus Notes. Okay. No, you're not going to do that. Well, we're going to run. No, you're not going to do that. You can still run everything. You need to think about what you put in the cloud and how it's protected, etc., etc. So what Microsoft said is that they want to keep the European market. I mean, it's a company that want to make money. They want to sell to the European Union, but to be able to do that, they need to change things. Otherwise, people are. And I think you heard people saying, we are thinking about leaving Microsoft as a platform. I mean, I'm pretty sure all of you have heard somebody thinking that, right? 10 years ago, nobody said that. Then everybody would like to marry everybody in the United States. But now that discussion is going on. So they are doing something for the public cloud. And you will be able to download the slides later on, so don't need to take notes. But they are doing a couple of things. This is data guardian change. This is interesting. It basically means that if somebody from Microsoft headquarters, from Corp, needs to access data within the European Union, meaning you're running the West Europe data center, If they need access to do something, it needs to be monitored by a European citizen. Somebody that works for Microsoft, right? They work for Microsoft, but they live in the European Union, and they are abide by the laws of the European. It's also recorded. So nobody can access data and do anything unless it's supervised. That's interesting. This is better. This basically means that you can have your own key. You can have your own hardware key. So you run a server on-prem, or in your closet, or in your bathroom, it doesn't really matter, and it contains a key. And everything that is then encrypted in Azure is using that key. Most likely they're going to use two keys. Microsoft is going to use their key in combination with your key, right? So they combine the keys. But that also means that when somebody says, I would like to extract your data, because according to Cloud Act, we are allowed to grab your data, then Microsoft can say, sure, here's the data. It's encrypted. Yes, it is. We need a key. We don't have the key, but you can always call the customer and ask for the key. And if they call you, are you going to give them the key? Most likely not. You're going to go like, sorry, no. Unless it's law enforcement within the European Union, then there's another discussion. But it means that using this technology will be better to protect data. They're also going to add a portal for European Union-based companies and organizations using Azure that more or less says, I want to be compliant with the following regulations. And then you check that box, and then it's going to say, okay, that's cool, but that means we're going to enable these things, and we're going to disable these things, because these functions that we have in Azure can never be compliant. And then you can either say, okay, or ignore, or whatever, but it's going to make it easier. So that's what they're doing for the public cloud. Now, there are organizations that says that's enough, that's good, we are good to go, but there are organizations that says no, this is not enough. So, two locations within Europe, and that's going to be France and Germany. We asked around if Sweden is going to be one of them. No, Sweden is too small. But maybe there's going to pop up something else. But in France, there is an organization called Blue, which is Orange and Capgemini. They run Azure on their own hardware. They lease, rent, buy Azure from Microsoft and run it in their own data center. There is no connection between them and Azure, right? Are they going to supply or provide all the functionalities? No, but a lot of them. The essence and the basics is there. And the same thing for Germany. That's SAP that runs it in Germany. So they do the same thing. Their own hardware, their own data center, but it's completely controlled by SAP. So these organizations also use the regulations within the country, which means that the French and the German government, in theory, if they so wish, can run on these clouds and not operated by Microsoft. They also have a bunch of what's called preview partners. Preview partners is going to help customers to implement these things. And that also includes the private cloud, which we're going to look on. So they already have a bunch of partners working on this. Now, the public part is, of course, interesting. If you do run Azure in West Europe or within the European Union, you don't need to buy anything to get these features. They will be automatically activated when they are available. And they will be available, according to Microsoft, in the year 2025, which is this year, and most likely around Christmas time. Now, that can, of course, be Christmas or January or February, but the idea is to have this as for now. So if you're running the public cloud, you're just going to have the, would you like to enable the security key feature, blah, blah, blah. Would you like to do this, etc., etc. And the reason is geopolitical issues and regulations, which is, of course, something we understand. Today, Azure Local is general available, so that part is done. We also know that what's called Azure Local Disconnected, that's in preview. It's working, but it's not fully supported. The reason why Microsoft is running a lot of things in what they call a preview is that the support statement is different. If you run something in preview, you can't expect to get the same support level as if you're running something in general availability. The Azure Local Low Performance, which we're going to talk about later on, is also in preview. It's also working. And the Microsoft 365 Local is in private preview. That means that you can't download it and use it right now. And everything is planned for late 2025. If they announce this summer, and they are giving themselves 6 months, do you think they had this plan a long time before, and they just decided to activate it now because it was appropriate to do so? Because I'm pretty sure that Microsoft didn't wake up 1st of June and go like, hey, I have an idea. Let's re-architecture everything and let's make it available for everyone in 6 months. Yes, that's a great idea. Let's do that. I'm pretty sure they had this plan for a few years, actually. The technology behind everything is, of course, supported hardware from vendors. That means HP, Dell, Lenovo, Supermicro, basically anyone that creates a PC is a supported vendor, more or less. It doesn't mean all models, right? So that's one thing. They run Azure Local, which is Azure Stack, used to be named Azure Stack HCI. Now it's named Azure Local. And when you do the Microsoft 365 Local, then they run Exchange, SharePoint, and hold your horses. They run Skype for Business and call it, oh, where's Teams? Well, Teams isn't really one application, and it was developed for the cloud. Will they ever? Maybe. It depends on how many people are asking or acquiring, and etc., etc. But it also means, because I read the statements of these things, and they said, if you buy this license form, you buy Microsoft 365 Local, and you run it local, and you run it isolated, they give you at least 10 years full support. So that means that if you run Skype for Business as a regular customer, it's going to be like, well, the support is around the corner there somewhere, but maybe it's going to stop working, we don't know. But in this package form, it's 10 years. Reason is factory needs to look beyond, and larger organizations just can't flip software that fast. They will most likely add more functionalities and software to this. One of the things that I know is working as part of this is, of course, Kubernetes. That works today, and also Azure Virtual Desktop. So you can run your full AVD on-prem. That's not a problem at all. In fact, that's one of the things we do because we use Azure Virtual Desktop for our incident VMs when we are accessing customers, and running them in Azure is just too expensive. Let's put it that way. The hardware investment we need to do pays off in less than 6 months. And the rest of the 2.5 years is just profit for us. We can't run it in Azure. When you're building these things nowadays, they are slightly different. You can actually run everything on one node. It's going to be the full experience. You have one machine. It's like over there. It has even. You don't need to build storage spaces direct even anymore. It used to have that, but right now you can build what they called single node with 2 disks. One for the operating system and one for the data. What's the purpose of having that? It's not highly available, right? No, but it is something that is fully managed from Azure like anything else. And you like that idea? Fine, you can do it that way. But you can also build the 2 nodes, switchless, 2-way mirror, 3 nodes, switchless, 3-way mirror. It's when you come up to 4, up to 16 nodes, then we need to have switches, cabling, etc., etc., etc. But building a 3-node, switchless, how do you think you connect the machines without switches? All the storage is crossover connected. That's what you do. So you need to have 4 network adapters or 4 ports, and then you interconnect them in a mesh on the backside, and it works perfectly fine. So then you just use gigabit on the front side as management and compute, which means that everybody can have a 3-node solution in the bathroom if you want to. Don't put it in the bathroom, it's just moisture and stuff, but I've seen that in an incident. They did have the server in the bathroom. So why would you do the disconnect? Well, the disconnect solution is completely disconnected. Does it mean it's disconnected forever? No. It's disconnected for operations. It will need to connect. But that's something when you decide when to connect. It needs to connect for licensing, because you're still paying a license fee, right? And for the simplicity of calculations and stuff like that, they really need to connect it. Now, they haven't defined exactly when and how often, but we heard something around you should be able to be disconnected for at least a year. Some information is you should be at least for 2 years. I believe the 1 year, that's reasonable. The connection is not random. The connection is through an ADFS gateway, so it's really you put it in an on switch, and then you synchronize, and then you disconnect. What happens if it doesn't do that? Well, then the licensing is not going to work. What happens if there is a war and we can't connect? Well, it's still going to run, and it's still going to work. So it's not like, Windows 7 go like, oh, you didn't pay for the license, we're going to turn off your computer. No, that's not going to happen. It's still going to run. It's still going to work. So nothing like that. Another reason is, of course, limited network infrastructure. We have factories in locations where you're like, is that even a location? Do you have an address? No, it's just in the middle of absolutely nowhere. And having them building factories in those locations and relying on internet connectivity, it doesn't fly. So we even have organizations that are thinking of running this in a box. It's more or less a portable data center. I built one many years ago, but these are a bit bigger. But they really work. So you take that and you go to the whatever power plant you're building, because you're building a nuclear power plant in the middle of absolutely nothing. And the first 4 years, there's nothing. They don't even have birds out there. It's like, hello. Electricity. No, we're building that. It's going to take 10 years before we're done here. So that also works. Oil rigs, I haven't done that. I would like to, if anybody of you have an oil rig that needs to deploy, please let me know. I can work cheap. Like to just be there. Security, of course. That's going to be the other one. It's like, hey, we really need to be disconnected. Why? Well, we are doing things that nobody should know of. So we are disconnected. We are off grid. And that also works. When you do this, you don't get everything, because you are disconnected. But what you do get is the portal. Hey, we're running the portal. I'm running Azure. I have a piece of Azure in my pocket. That's awesome. I can log on. ARM is, of course, there. Everything that has to do with permissions, identity, ARC-enabled servers, and you can run the Azure local VMs. That's nice. Kubernetes works, local device management, the key vault works. It's very important that the key vault works off grid, because there is a scenario where you can build Azure Local without Active Directory. That's pretty new. It's also in preview. But that means that I can build my 4-node cluster that doesn't have any Active Directory, but it's using the key vault instead. So that's why we need to have the key vault. And policies works as well. And that's the interesting thing. You can build this solution with no Active Directory. And if you don't have an Active Directory, I mean, I work with security, right? So I know that the threat actor is really eager to get into the domain controller, because if I can get into the domain controller, it's game over. They don't have a domain controller. What? No. Yes, you must. How should I? No. They don't even really have passwords, because everything is certificate-based, authentication-wise. Hacking this is going to be interesting. I want to let our forensic team try to do that, but I'm pretty sure they're going to just walk away and be upset and say, no, I'm going to do an XP instead. That's easier. It's less things in that solution. It's actually easier to set up. It sounds weird and corny, but no, you don't really need an infrastructure. It's not completely true, because you do need a DNS server. Ish. You can always fake that. Anybody heard of hosts file? Don't go that way. So that means that we can run Azure Local completely isolated, and even without Active Directory. Now, this is a private cloud. Now, you can do this with Hyper-V, and you can do this with VMware as well, but then you don't have the control plane in Azure, and you need to use a bit more legacy infrastructure to work that way. And the same goes for Microsoft 365 Local. It can run on this disconnected environment. So you're really running Azure on-prem. The low capacity is another interesting feature. So let's say that you have one larger data center where you have like 3 or 4 or 60 nodes or something like that. But then you have a couple of remote locations, and you would like to manage them the same way. Fine. You put the HP DL380 over there, and a 360 over there, and a Dell machine over there, and you run them as standalone local machines, and you use the same Azure portal, and you connect to them, and you work with them the same way. Manage, monitor, etc., etc. But they can run on more or less any kind of hardware. Not supposed to read this, but It basically means it needs to have something, and the OS disk needs to be 200 gig. You need to have 32 gigs of RAM. That's it. That's I don't know, you buy it in Walmart or something like that. Coop, maybe have something. You can build this clustered, but if you need to cluster it, it really needs to have 10 gigabit network connectivity. But it doesn't need to have RDMA or anything like that. You just crossover connect cables, and the maximum number of nodes, I think it's like 3 or something like that. So when you build this solution, you need to start thinking, should I or should I not have Active Directory? Well, that's more of the question if, do you need Active Directory for something else? Yes, we're going to have our users. No. Your hypervisors should absolutely never be connected to your regular Active Directory, period. This is not a discussion. That's number one reason for every ransomware attack for the last 6 years. They hit the hypervisors, regardless of it's Hyper-V or VMware. I mean, we have ransomware groups today that specialize in developing encryption software for VMware. They are developing encryption ransomware for VMware. They have thousands of developers working in it to make it as fast as possible. The time we see now is like 5 minutes to destroy a cluster. Where's all my VMs? They are gone forever. So, if you do Active Directory, then it's a separated, isolated Active Directory. The other Active Directory where you have users, it is what it is, right? Number of nodes, switches. Should you or should you not use isolation? Because you need to take that under consideration when you build it, so you know you have all the components for it. The fabric itself is what we define as the bubble. You put all the components here. If you need Active Directory, you build it here. And you have all the storage, etc., etc. This is the only way to prevent ransomware attacks. It's to isolate your hypervisors. That is number one. It doesn't matter if it's going to be harder for somebody that is trying to access or hack an Azure Local that doesn't use Active Directory, because then everything is certificate-based, and they can't really access the key vault. So it will be more difficult. But I'm pretty sure somebody slipped up and the local administrator password is password? Exclamation mark? Because it needs to be secure. No, you can't do that. When you're building Azure Local, it actually requires you to have the local passwords compliant with Azure policies. They need to be 14 characters, lowercase, uppercase, special character, and a number. So you can't have horrible passwords. Network, if you decide to do 4 nodes or something like that, I strongly recommend you to build on iWarp. I know that Dell, HP, Lenovo is trying to sell you ROCE because they make more money on that. iWarp requires you to have absolutely 0 skills in configuring your switches. You connect the cable, and then you're done. With ROCE, you need to be a scientific engineer, and you need to be as close as winning the Nobel Prize in physics to be able to manage that switch. Don't do that. It's horrible. Also, can I use my regular switches? Yes, you can. Technically, you can. And then you have this junior techie guy that goes in, oh, I'm gonna firmware upgrade the switch. I'm gonna do both of them at the same time. So then he upgrades the switch, and then you don't have any storage anymore because you just flatline everything and go like, holy, where's my, well, that's gone. Oh, yeah. Don't do that. Horrible. Don't need to look at that. The automatic train control, we're going to look at that. This is actually very good. This is a feature that I like. So let's dig into this one. You can still see my screen, yes. So this is a cluster I have. Let's do a refresh of that. In Windows Admin Center. You can see the networking, and you can, like that. Here you have the network ATC intents. When you're building the solution, you are defining the network. These two network adapters are going to be my management network adapters. These are going to be the compute, and these are going to be the storage. You configure everything when you do the setup, right? That's cool. If somebody tries to change that, the operating system is immediately changing it back. There is an ATC, the controller, inside the operating system that says, this is the definition of how the network is going to be used. Somebody changed that. I'm changing it back. If you need to change it, you need to change it here. I like this because we always have people that likes to disassemble things, and then I'm just trying to change things here. Yes, you're 15 years and you have a moped, then you can play with that, but don't play with this because this is going to cost us money. So you need to understand that everything is here. Can you change the DNS? No, you can't. Can you change the IP address? No, can't. Can you change the settings on the network adapter? Nope, can't. It's always going to put it back in the same way. For some reason, Azure Local is much more stable than Hyper-V for this particular reason, because it's configured as intents. Because if you can do it in Hyper-V as well, but nobody does, because it's complicated. So they just configure the network adapter, and then somebody else, a year later, changes something. So we have the cluster settings, and we have the proxy settings, and we have the switches, and we also have the infrastructure. Yeah, that's just boring. Number of nodes. Well, you don't pay for nodes when you run Azure Stack, or Azure Local, that's important. It's the same for Azure Stack, the former version. You pay for number of cores. That's what you're paying for. So if you have a 3-node or a 4-node or a 2-node, but you have the same amount of CPUs, then it's going to cost you the same amount of money anyway. That's difference, because if you run Windows Server, then you pay for 8 or 16 and number and etc., etc. So there's a difference between that. Go away. Go away. Yeah, we don't need to talk about that. The migration part, because you always have things running either Windows or you're running VMware or you're running Hyper-V, is Azure Migrate. Anybody used Azure Migrate? It's pretty slick. I like it. Do you like it? It's okay, right? It's not that complicated. In this case, you spin up 2 VMs, one for the source and one for the destination, and then you go like migrate. It takes forever, but it works. It does integrate them correctly, so they will be fully managed with Azure Arc agents. There are things you need to care about. If you are using Azure Arc, then that needs to be uninstalled before they are migrated, because in the destination, Azure Local will automatically install Azure Arc, and it will install it differently because now it's a combination of a virtual machine and a physical machine at the same time. It's not that I slipped up the first time I did this and had to redo it, but I have a friend that did that. So don't do that. Setting up Azure Local is very, very simple. You just go through the same thing as anything else. Most important, password needs to be 14 characters complex. It looks like that when you set it up. And if you want to play with this, you have two options. Number one, you can install Azure Local on your laptop. You need a VM with 32 gigs of RAM and 2 hard disks and 1 network adapter. And that's it. If you want to play with it in a bigger environment, then you need still 1 server, and then you build 4 VMs. So this works building VMs. You don't pay for any licenses, 60 days. For each solution you set up, you can play with it for 60 days, throw it away. That's why you put it in 1 resource group in Azure, and then you just ditch it. If you don't want to have that, you can use the Azure Arc Jump Box. When you do that, it's going to cost you money. If you forget about this solution, somebody is going to call you and tell you that you forgot to turn it off. That's going to be your manager, and he's going to have the bill from Azure, and he's going to explain for you how money works and how your salary now is less for a very long time. The Azure Arc Jump Box itself doesn't cost money, but it consumes 32 vCPUs. So it burns money while it's running. If you're a consultant, you can spin it up. Takes a couple of hours, and then you can do a demo for a customer, and then you can turn it off and throw it away. But don't have it running for a month. I had a friend of mine did that, and his manager happens to be my manager as well, just told him that it was stupid. Most important thing when you come to this point is that you cannot patch it. You can absolutely not patch it, because then it's going to fail. Rename it, disable DHCP, and set the new management IP address on 1 network adapter, and then you install the Azure Arc agent. Then it shows up in Azure. If you are using Active Directory, which is the easy one, then you need to prepare your Active Directory, which means that you need to create 1 OU. And then you run this command and say, this account is going to be the installer account for that OU. And then you're done. This takes 4 seconds to do. And then you set IP address, and you test, of course. Can my virtual or physical machine, does it have access to Azure? As long as you're building the traditional not disconnected version, it really needs to have access to the internet. Then you build everything in Azure. This is the weird part. You really build everything in Azure. You fill out the form, you fill out the intent, you define everything. This is the whatever tip. For each solution you build, specify a unique location and use a separate resource group, because they are going to share things within that resource group. So if you put 2 Azure Local solutions in the same resource group, it's going to be difficult to say which one of all these items in this mess should I remove. So you're not going to remove any of them because you don't, you know. And then you need to pay for the other one, which you're not using, but you're afraid of removing because you don't know. Each solution goes to each separate resource group and a separate location. That's going to be so easy for you to do this. Here's the security part. This is kind of simple. You just define what kind of security features. When you're playing around, it doesn't matter. This is the most important thing, both for production and playing. Don't say create everything. That's the default. Because when it does create everything, but it does use thin provisioning, and it does a miscalculation. So it creates thin disks that are twice as large as your maximum capacity. Which means that when you're playing with this, after a while you go like, why is it barfing? Well, you don't have disk space. Well, it looks like I'm having disk space. Yes, the volume was like 5 terabytes, but you only have 2.5. Okay, so how do you shrink them? You can't. Okay, but then I can remove no, you can't. So how do I fix this? You reinstall everything. But I have 400 VMs running here. Yes. Now you need to move them. How? How do you move them from yourself to yourself? We can't. You need to turn them off, export them, put them on a USB stick, rebuild the entire solution, and then you need to use Azure Migrate to migrate them back. But that's going to take you like a year. Yes. You shouldn't check the box. We have been trying to convince Microsoft to don't do that. But for now, create the required infrastructure because that's not going to be thin, and then do the rest. And then it's validation time. And validation time is boring. If you're a consultant, this is great money. The only thing you do is watch progress bars for like 3 hours. Once this is done, you go like, now it's done. No. The only thing we've done now was validation. Okay, so now it's the install time. Yes. Building a 4-node cluster takes approximately 4 hours. That's also good consultant money. You just watch the progress bar and something like that. So let's take a look on how it looks like. So we're here. I have 3 solutions. One is busted because I was forced to disconnect my network. This is a toy. This is a HP ProLiant microserver. Toy server. Works perfectly fine. So we can take a look at that. There are configurations you should do. Things like this, for instance. If you have the correct subscription, you can say, activate my Azure subscription. And using the Azure subscription means that, well, everything is pay as you go, so you don't need to activate your licenses. But if you have a proper license, an enterprise license agreement, then you can activate what's called Azure Hybrid Benefit. That means that you pay your on-prem licenses, and for that you get everything in Azure Local for free, because you don't need to pay it at all. The infrastructure is all the machines. Here we can see them. They are connected. It's up and running. It's running 24H2. I'm running the latest version now, and the latest version is actually the same as Windows Server 2025. So right now there are 2 versions of Azure Local. One that is running Windows Server 2022 latest version, and one that is running Server 2025 newest version. It's just a build in between them. The difference is drivers. So if you have new hardware or want to play with it, then you run the latest version. If you have older hardware, then you run the 2022 version. You can download both of them. And here's all your resources. So now we manage everything in the portal. And if this portal was off-grid, offline, it wouldn't say Azure Local, it would say portal.michaelsazure. Something, whatever, internal name. But here we have all the VMs. Stop, start, connect, modify, change, all my Kubernetes clusters, all my logical networks, all the disks that are being used by the VMs. You can throw them away, you can ditch them, you can reconnect them, pretty much the same as Azure. You have the VM images, you have the network infrastructure, and the most interesting things. This is new. This is preview, and it's actually failing. They added network security groups. Anybody played with network security groups in Azure? Sure you have. You know exactly what it is. It's the firewall in Azure. Now they have that in Azure Local as well. So together with the software, the load balancer and the network address translation engine, also known as software-defined network, we can now have security groups. So you can create the security groups and say, this is inbound traffic, this is outbound traffic, this is, allow RDP, etc., etc., etc. So that means that we can, in theory, publish this directly on the internet. Nobody's going to do that. You're going to have a real firewall in front, but that means that you can, from this now, play with the entire network and the virtual machines. And here you have the storage paths. You manage everything through either the Azure portal when you're not doing weird things, because then you use Windows Admin Center. And if you do more weird things, then it's just, PowerShell, command prompt, logging on. It's just Hyper-V. It's just another shape and form of it. I'm looking forward to the release of Microsoft 365. We currently have at least 4 municipalities in Sweden that are lining up for moving away from the VMware platform that are running to Azure Local, but they want to be disconnected and they want to run Microsoft 365 Local for various reasons. But so that's what I have in pipeline. That said, I have consumed too much time. I enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Thank you very much for coming. And if you do have any questions, just come up directly after. Thank you.